So what you just witnessed right now is something I call space trading or screen estate and can play a major role in how interactions between players are handled. This is one of the most obscure and unknown factors in fighting games that you might have lost to before without realizing it during a match. Before that though, first thing first. Alright, so, hey kids. I'm back from the far beyond once again to drop a 7th gem upload before vanishing into the night once more. I appreciate all the support I've been given and receiving up to this point though on my other videos, and have been reading the comments, and it makes my day to see them all well received, along with trying to take in some of you guys' feedback to improve my video quality for you all. It really does mean the world for you guys to support me like you have, and I only hope for your continued support in the future as well. If you are new or just simply not already subscribed, then please do so if you like this kind of content, and it helps me out much more than you ever know. You can also catch me on Twitch from time to time as well. A lot of random games and fun over there, so go over there, go check it out. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's get on to the video. Okay, so what do I mean exactly when I say the terms space trading or screen estate? Well, it refers to the physical size and boundary limits of any given map you are playing on inside of any 2D fighter and how you use it to your advantage. As for like 3D fighters such as Tekken, I'll be real with you, I don't really know what's going on over there. Those guys, they be doing something else, man. I ain't gonna touch that game to find out either. After some of those recent patches, I'm good. Anyways, despite being one of the most overlooked features in fighting games, it is fundamentally important to the core of the genre and how any particular game plays and feels. For example, in Street Fighter 6, the size of the map is decently big and usually takes a decent bit of effort to reach the corner during a real match. However, once reaching that corner, it spells terrible news for the one getting their daylight beaten off of them in the corner, since escape is cut off and characters' best combos / punishes are accessible only in the corner. This holds true for Grand Blue as well, except for the fact that in GBVS, the map is a tiny bit smaller and average character corner carry is much stronger as well. So basically, you will almost always certainly be seeing someone getting curb stomped in the corner, praying to God they get their next RPS right. There is another approach to the corner though, popularized in Strive and implemented in the soon to release Tokon as well, which is simply having no corner in your game or a breakable wall to some degree. Along with the wall being breakable, the map size is also very small compared to average fighting games, which serves to tell the player to just not care about nor really worry over the corner or your space on the map too much, but rather instead, it just wants you to focus on neutral more without bothering over the headache of getting out of a sticky situation. Of course, there are always many more examples that I can pull from and explain how they are all different in their purposes and implementations, but for now you get the general gist of the idea. So why am I bothering to explain this all to you for something seemingly kind of arbitrary and pointless? Well, it has to do with player psychology and using the type of map structure in your chosen fighting game to your advantage. So, sticking with the more traditional approach to the corner in any particular game, first, let's talk about what it does to the player's psyche when they're the one in the corner, and then what it's like to be the one pushing the person into the corner like a helpless animal. So, to begin with, in a typical match between two players, it is generally good to play on the more cautious side and not make any rash moves too early on when unneeded, such as letting out early DPs or being too quick to begin mashing on your opponent's pressure strings. However, this dynamic slowly and subtly begins to pitch the other way as HP bars are draining, resources for cashing out are stacking, and a player's back is reaching ever closer to the corner. When this happens and a player is in an ever more disadvantageous situation, you start to see subtle shifts in behavior and risk assessment in RPS situations. The decision being made becomes more extreme, more risky, and overall more frequent to desperately reverse that said situation they are currently in. Hence the reason that any good player will subtly shift their behaviors and pressure to a more reserved playstyle against their opponent towards the end of a round to compensate for that factor. If you don't believe me, then try going back to watch any VOD of either your own match or other players from top level / tournament level footage, or even just general rank games that you're doing. Keep a general tally of each time any particular player does what you consider a risky option, along with to what level of risk that they took from either a small mash to a full-on screw it super level kind of reversals, and then check to see where they were at on the screen and their rough amount of HP as well during the time. Trust me, very valuable and a lot to gain from insight by doing such a thing as this, and it's also generally one of those small subtle things that you see from experienced players who seem to have this knack for just knowing when someone is going to do something always, but can't fully explain why they know. Humans are creatures of habits at the end of the day. Some are just better than others at hiding them enough to not be easily read. Okay, so I've been talking about the one being rocked in the corner, but what about the one doing the rocking in the corner? Why does it matter to know what is going on for the one winning, especially if they're the one winning to begin with? Well, it is important to know through the mindset of what your opponent is actively seeing in you, and to know where your weaknesses are even when an advantage, in order to close them off and ensure your opponent's chances of flipping the script back on you are kept to a minimal. After all, in the landscape of modern fighting games where most supers take half your health bar casually almost, it is important to always know that you're always one lucky and desperate reversal away from either outright losing the entire match, or at the very least losing control of the situation you slowly and carefully built up towards. So with that in mind, it is important to remember about staying calm and collected throughout your entire match, and to treat anything you do as your last potential option up until you see either the victory or losing screen. However, the aggressor still has some tools and advantages over the one put into the corner. These things are positions of who is in the corner first and foremost, obviously, which is important to not downplay the significance of, and plays a large factor in the power dynamic and control between the two players. Then there are also health and resource advantages in most typical situations that you can play to your advantage as well. A good aggressor recognizes their leverage in the situation and what they need to do in order to close out a round while avoiding unnecessary risk. To give an example, it would be a player only needing to chip their opponent once or twice more for a finish on their opponent. Instead of trying to run inherently risky RPS that have large chances of failure along with punishments if they are wrong, it's better to just go for the safe but guaranteed chip damage routes that gives the opponent no chances of escaping nor interacting with you. This is inherently even better if you have resources to burn to take even more control away from the opponent, such as putting them in true block streams that have higher amount of chip damage than rather if there's any gaps for them to potentially reversal you. Okay, so now that you understand both players' mindsets during a situation involving the corner, we can now start breaking down how you can use space to your advantage. So just like your health bar is a resource, so is your space that you control in the map. You can use the space you hold to trade for one of a few things: trickier pressure, return to neutral, or easier defense. Starting with defense and how it makes it easier for you to defend starts with explaining how you trade space for ease of defending. During your defense, as long as you aren't backed up into a wall, you can slowly but surely walk backwards in between your opponent's block string gaps instead of mashing, and after a couple of blocks combined with slowly walking back, what will happen is one of two things. Either A, your opponent has a brain attached to them. I know, kind of a big ask these days in fighting games, but assume they do have one though. They will quickly notice you doing this and will have to give up their current pressure string and take a risk of trying to run in to reset their pressure earlier than they wanted to, which will allow you to then be able to press a button on them to escape and get out safely. Then there is scenario B. Your opponent will have to recognize that their pressure is coming to an end earlier than they wanted to and allow the match to return back to neutral instead of risking a hard pressure reset. Now, there is also the situation where your opponent doesn't have a brain and keeps following along the flowchart and pressure string without adapting to the ever-growing space between you two. In this case, it allows for you to intentionally create a spacing trap for them that you can then whiff punish if ready for it and make them regret autopiloting so much against you. Now, as for trading space to return to neutral, it can be done for a couple of reasons. The first of which would be in a situation where you and your opponent are already trying to hit each other during neutral, but you made a bad play such as a slightly poor fireball timing and spacing, whiffed buttons in neutral, or being in your opponent's effective range instead of yours, etc. etc. The point is, you are seeking to get out of a potentially bad situation and then have another shot at turning the tide in your favor. A way to view it is trading the immediate danger of being put onto defense and potentially getting opened up during it by giving up some of your space control of the map and willingly putting yourself ever closer to the corner that could lead to an even steeper price to pay if caught once again in an unfavorable situation later on during a match with no more space to give to remain safe. Lastly, there is also using space to set up trickier pressure and laying out some traps for your opponent to unknowingly fall into. To be clear, this is not the same as spacing traps, which is set up and executed differently over space trading here. During pressure against your opponent in most games, you will be pushed out over time if your opponent isn't mashing against you, in which case starts to also weaken your options and overall offense potential. In order to counteract this, you yourself will have to make a gamble of ending your pressure string early to run in and restart your pressure sequence all over again, which carries some inherent risk by allowing your opponent to have an opportunity to mash on you and get out. Now, instead of doing this, you can instead play to your advantage and control over the screen and space as a whole against your opponent in the corner. This is done by accepting that you're pushed out close range with your opponent, but instead of trying to run back in and potentially getting hit on trying to reset pressure, you rather either shimmy back and forth just barely out of your opponent's effective far range buttons and wait for them to press haphazardly to then be whiff punished. Then there is the other option of trying to bait your opponent into making a desperate move to get out of the corner by having them come to you first and running into your buttons. This is done by walking back just enough to where you're still within the tip of your effective range while giving a false sense of security to the opponent to finally let go of blocking and run forward instead to desperately escape the corner or close the gap between you. In doing so, they unconsciously put themselves into danger of your own attack to then appropriately be punished for it by running face first into it. So, let me start off this segment by first saying that what I mentioned here today isn't everything involving maps and the way you can manipulate them to your benefit. Rather, this is just more so of a helpful start to begin you on understanding even more of how your matches are influenced by factors you've probably never even given a second thought to before, such as the map itself and how you can leverage space on the map against your opponent's favor. Make sure to take a second and really reflect upon the concept more to understand it and how you plan on implementing it into your match or even developing it further into areas I haven't mentioned here. Curiosity and exploration is the key to improving and bettering oneself in this genre after. If you have any questions or just want further explanations of anything I said here, then be sure to drop a comment at the bottom of the video. Or if you just want to say something nice, that is fine as well and always appreciated. With that though, keeping it relatively short, I'll end the video here reiterating that if you like what you saw and want to support me further, then as always, be sure to like, subscribe, and follow me on all my socials and Twitch for not only FGC stuff but also other games as well. It always means a lot to me when you do. Now, go out there and start mashing some buttons in your favorite fighting games and paying a little more attention to how you can use maps and your general location on them to your advantage. Anyways, I'm signing off. Later.
Devil may cry.
Dante, I'm trying to fight these demons, but I'm dummy thick and the clap of my ass keeps alerting them. I understand you and Nero have the same problem.